All right, let's talk about this crazy statistic that I just learned, which kind of blows my mind. Did you know that EU, European Union, and the United States had the both exact same GDP in 2008, and US grew a lot more than Europe. Europe went from 14 trillion in 20 years approximately, went from 14 trillion to 19 trillion in GDP. United States went to 30. So basically, United States is 60% richer than EU, which is mind-blowing, right? Now, I know GDP has problems. For example, you can say the poorest state in America, Alabama, has a higher GDP than like Britain. However, it's kind of tricky because you can have a lot of poor people that live in poverty and but just have really big companies, really rich companies that go through a lot of money. Another issue with the GDP, it's supposed to measure the overall economy, like goods and services that your economy produces for people, for the citizens to buy. However, during World War II, they actually added government spending to the GDP, which kind of muddies the water a little bit, because you might say, like, what's wrong? Well, government spending is spending, right? But it's not like a government like North Korea can spend half of its economy on tanks and bombs and stuff like that, but it doesn't really translate to the average person's wealth. So there's that as well. America spends about 40% of its GDP on its government, so it's not this laissez-faire, pure capitalist system like some people want to believe. But Europe is not that far off. They spend about 50% of their GDP. So yeah, 10% more. So is that 10% extra spending they spend on the government really slowing them down that much? I remember back in the day, there was an interesting comparison. People used to point out that country, like island country, like Jamaica versus Singapore, they had roughly the same size economy, and Singapore just completely took off where Jamaica stayed stagnant. But that's kind of like an apples to orange comparison maybe, because the location, Singapore is right next to like the powerhouse China, so it could be like this financial and economic trading center, financial hub. So but yeah, Europe, man, what a shame. I really hope that A, they get their act together, and B, for the love of God, that Americans would stop trying to imitate Europe, especially Americans on the left, and try to impose all these awful regulations that would stagnate everything.